Doug said that, copyright, what did you say? A rat, unleash the rats or something like that? A rat's nest or something like that? So first of all, I'm not a lawyer, so if you want to throw stuff at me, it's pointless. Second, actually my intent here is to avoid unleashing rats, if anything. So if, for example, if Jake's vision of 2018 does become true, and we have a thriving ecosystem of annotations. So first of all, I work at Creative Commons. I'm the manager of science and data policy. My name is Puneet Kishor, and my mission in life is to ensure that things remain as open and free as possible, unencumbered unfettered by the law, basically. So if the annotation system does become rich and thriving, in 25 years it hasn't, but maybe in the next 7 or 8 or 10 years it might, then the issue of intellectual property could become a rat's nest, and that's something that you want to avoid. So I don't have any slides, and I actually don't even have any solutions. All what I have here is for the people who are designing the framework of annotations. And I have lots of ideas and opinions about other aspects, but I think they're not important here. Just all I want to say is that you should consider building the mechanism of giving the legal status, of making clear the legal status of the annotations right from get-go, right from the design stage. It should not be something that you think about in the as an afterthought, and it should be built in from the ground up. So, and keep in mind that it's not clear whether annotations even will have copyright in them or not. If they are, at least in the beginning stage, when they're very small, very little in amount, insignificant in amount, they probably may not have enough creative content in them to be copyrightable. But over time, it could become, you could have sort of equivalent of Cliff Notes on a website, say National Portrait Gallery or something like that, with enough rich annotations that somebody may want to download and or recreate something out of it, maybe even recreate a book out of it, or create a Android or iOS or whatever the hell might exist 10 years from now, an app for that, basically. So here's three things that I sort of think of, that every annotation should carry the necessary information with it. Every single piece of annotation should carry the necessary information with it to determine its legal status. License is basically metadata. That's all it is. It describes the permissions about what someone may do with that stuff, with that content. So every annotation should have that. And annotations can build upon other annotations. So basically, for every annotation that might be dependent upon other annotations, there would be a set of permissions that will sort of stack along. You should be able to basically track the provenance of the annotations, and that's really what is most important in case people want to assert their right for attribution, credit, or something, or maybe they want to restrict. Thinking in just CC in the Creative Commons vocabulary, they might want to restrict commercial exploitation of it or derivations of it, or they may want to license on a license that the Wikipedia utilizes. So there are several things to think about for you all, the technical people. How should one actually participate and express that license? Think of something like Rap Genius. Do you, by virtue of going to Rap Genius, do you agree to a particular license that is default for anything that you might submit? That's sort of what Wikipedia does. If you choose to write an article in Wikipedia or edit something, it's got to be by essay. You've got no choice, basically. It makes things really very simple, actually, instead of letting a complete free-for-all. Somebody's phone's ringing. Oh, is that my time?
It's your time.
Okay. So that's really what it is, or whether it should be on an annotation by annotation basis, which will be a real rat's nest, actually. And it should, of course, work across all platforms, so when you actually download the annotations, you also get the license information with it. CC already has the RDFA that you can embed, but there might be something even simpler that might be possible. So that's really the essence of my message here is.
Oh my goodness. Who anticipated that? Okay, so I'm actually going to...
Way more questions than... Be gentle, guys, okay?
No, I try to be gentle. So what you say is, I fully agree. An additional question is, do you envisage that the current CC license terms are okay or not? I mean, we have seen in the data publishing world that there is a necessity to have separate licensing agreement, and Data Commons is doing things around that, etc., because it seems that from a legal point of view, the Creative Commons were not enough. The question is whether do you envisage anything that has to be done in this space?
I don't. Actually, even from the data perspective, Creative Commons licenses are just good. Actually, they're just fine. There used to be a time when they were not. Even Creative Commons was not recommending the use of Creative Commons licenses for data, but not anymore. In November when we released our latest version, CC4, 5 months ago, the latest version of Creative Commons licenses actually cover database rights, which was one issue there. Our hope, more than vision, is that we probably will not have to create another version of CC licenses for the next decade. I think that gives the annotation community enough time to prove its success. Yeah.
Greg Kellogg, just a couple of issues I think related to this. There was an issue, I don't know what the disposition of that was, with regards to the right to link. Is there a similar issue perhaps with right to annotate? Is that something we need to be concerned with? Is there a possible extension of CC that would perhaps restrict someone's right to annotate? Hopefully not, but I wonder if this has been considered.
So first of all, language clarification, Creative Commons licenses don't restrict people, they actually enable people. So there is no Creative Commons license that restricts in any way. I mean, though they do impose certain conditions such as non-commercial, etc. I have no idea about the right to link or right to annotate restrictions. I mean, you could always have terms of services which could restrict things like that. That's what people try to do, but those are bad web citizens anyway. So,
I have a higher level comment. If I understood you, you were talking about the idea of carrying the license for the annotation, not the license for the source material, correct?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about this, I think that's a legitimate conversation, but I think direct questions to him should be specifically about licensing and the annotations.
This is completely about the license to the annotations themselves, because the license of the source material will, of course, be determined by the author. Remember that... Yes, exactly. Remember that you can only license something that you have rights in. That means if I create an annotation, I can license that. I can't license Ivan's comments. Okay? You can only license your own rights. Rob?
Oh, actually, it's
Tim. Sorry, go ahead.
Tim, so...
You should do this or something, or do this or something. I don't know.
So that last point is actually kind of related to what I'm going to ask. You mentioned the importance of provenance in order to understand then who can assert licenses later on for the annotation. We've talked about provenance in many different contexts here. A lot of times it's just a matter of going to be able to filter out what annotations look like. We would use, for that, identification systems, which might be fairly lax. So I could go in, I could say I'm Rob Sanderson, and most annotation tools would often accept that. But if there was a legal issue later on, that would not be deemed acceptable. Is that something we have to worry about? Can we get around that if we do the idea that you come to this site, your annotations are going to be open? I mean, is there something like that that can be done?
I don't know how to answer that question. Actually, that's the honest answer, really. I really don't know how to answer that question. Yeah.
No, I'm Rob Sanderson.
Yeah. I mean, Creative Commons licenses really apply only to the IP portion of it. They don't apply to any other aspects of authentication of whether it was the person who did the thing correctly.
Responsibilities of the application.
Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to say, in terms of the open annotation model, what you're talking about is licensing of the bodies, not the annotation itself, because there may actually be multiple bodies and you might not have created them. So in creating an annotation, you might be saying this piece of content on the web is annotating this other piece, but somebody else has created that content and somebody's created the source material. So I think we have to be really careful about the way that we attach licenses and be clear whether we're attaching them to the annotation, to the bodies, or to the content, because if you're doing things like representing a selector, which is a quote from a source material, then you've got to also have the licensing information for that quote.
Okay, I'm a bit lost because I'm not sure I understand the difference between the body and the source material.
Okay, I can explicate that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we have an annotation. An annotation is composed of roughly, let's say, two parts. The first part is what is the original source, and the original source, and where is it specifically? Like, which words am I selecting? And that original source, because you're containing that part as the thing to find it again, there's an additional copyright that might apply to the source because you have a snippet of the source that you're talking about, and then the body of the annotation is your comment on the annotation. And it's possible you're connecting through an annotation two different source materials. So each annotation might carry with it, if I understand you.
For each body, in fact, you might have a number of different bodies.
No. Okay. So if per body, but also per link, per source.
So, as I mentioned, you can only license what you create. You cannot license somebody else's stuff. Taking a snippet from somewhere as a quote, that would probably come under fair use. That would not be an issue at all, because you're not changing it anyway, it's small enough, etc. But you would license only the stuff that you have created. Now, keep in mind, actually in some ways, it may sound scary, but it's not. It's really establishing conventions. That's what it is. Hopefully, the idea behind CC is, at least the way I think is not so much to declare legal boundaries about what you can or cannot do, but to establish norms of how to behave, right? I mean, when I wear a Creative Commons t-shirt and somebody else sees me with a Creative Commons t-shirt, they immediately recognize what I'm about. That's why we have like stickers on our computers and stuff like that, right? And if I had on my iPad, if I had a National Rifle Association sticker, you would form some ideas about me, versus say CC stickers. So it's sort of like that. It is not clear at all that just by virtue of attaching a license, you actually have something that's protectable or not. All you're doing is establishing certain norms. Is that what you're doing? Like giving credit, behaving nicely, things like that.
I do think, not to distract from that, but I think as a technical requirement, you're suggesting that maybe the fine-grainedness of the licensing is you may have multiple licenses on any given annotation.
Or I think it's attached to the bodies and to the sources in the same way that provenance is.
Right. Okay. Frederick?
It's Frederick. So I'm a little confused. I've forgotten to copyright my Twitter tweets.
Can you speak a bit louder?
I haven't copyrighted my Twitter, and I can't fit it in, but why do we need to copyright annotations? I'm losing the context. Let me finish. I have one possible answer, which is in the earlier presentation we heard that some annotations could be substantial and be extensive enough that I could understand why they would warrant copyright perhaps. But I don't understand why brief annotations or comments would require copyright necessarily.
I didn't say that they would have copyright. I said they could have copyright for this very reason. I mean, again, 10 years from now, you could have a substantive body of annotations around a website, depending on the website, where there may be issues where copyright might apply. I don't know. All I'm saying is that it should be built in the framework, in the design of the annotations themselves. I have no idea whether the annotations will be copyrightable or not, but what if they were? Copyright attaches to stuff that is of original authorship and fixed and tangible medium. If somebody wants to duke it out in a court, they can do that, right? Nobody knows whether there is copyright or not. Does that make sense? You don't seem convinced or happy about my answer.
Well, I think you deep dive into the galleries and collections and so on.
Sorry, I didn't realize there was going to be. Just a second.
No, he went like that.
Yeah, but
I was just going to say we could also go into what it means to have a collection of annotations with different authors and how is that copyright. I mean, I think there's a whole legal exploration here that hasn't happened yet, probably.
and this is Phil.
So some of the arguments for copywriting annotations is that you can actually grab an annotation, highlight a text, and actually transcribe that text literally and start copying and multiplying. If you add them all up, you've actually reproduced the entire text. So basically, there's reasons why there should be some copyright mechanisms inside an annotation structure, because and there's also fair use. There's a lot of issues, but the idea is that you can go and copy and the text literally. Nobody's stopping you from doing that.
Let me put this another way. I'm not advocating that there should be copyright on annotations at all. I am saying that the legal status of the annotations should be clear. If at some point the annotations become substantive enough that they become rich enough to be intellectual property, at that point, you would say, I wish in 2014 we would have thought about this. That's what I'm saying. Remember, we're already in 2018, right? Was that 2018? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to clarify the annotation that he made on your comment. I'm going to annotate his annotation. He wasn't calling into question whether...
No. I was...
Sure.
Yeah, Phil was actually sort of supporting my...
Well, actually, he was saying that there's a slightly different use case, and this goes back to Anna's point, which is any given annotation should carry some sort of copyright information, or because when I write something, at least in the United States, I'm automatically granted copyright.
Right.
And you're suggesting using Creative Commons to allow people to know how they can use my content. But
exactly.
I might be commenting on somebody else's content, and some snippet of some quote from what they said, you could, if you had enough of those, you could recreate the entire text. So if there were a book that I myself did not purchase, but I see all the annotations on it, all the annotations together might give me rights to see the book, even though I don't have rights to see the book. And that's what he was addressing, which is a different issue from what you were doing.
No, and actually that does bring actually another issue. Thanks for pointing that out. That your annotations might implicate the copyright of the underlying source material, whereby if the underlying source material being under a Creative Commons license would be very good as well. You know, because if you had, for example, a no derivatives license, and I don't know whether no derivatives license allow translations or not, or some other, maybe an all rights reserved license, then translations might be prohibited, and you couldn't do the annotations on them. So,
and in fact, that's already happened. So someone went through and annotated every 100 characters of the Steve Jobs biography, where the comment was the sequence in which to reconstruct it, and bang, the entire text is suddenly available. So this is why this, I think it was Kevin before, we need multiple ways to describe this is the bit of text that I'm talking about, some of which will work fantastically when the text is open, and some of which you'll only want to use when the text shouldn't be open.
Yeah. I mean, my whole purpose of this presentation is, so I'm on your list, right? And I see issues of design all the time. All I'm saying is that a couple of you brainiacs should spend some cycles thinking about the licensing part. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Philip Grant. I have great sympathy with your idea that there should be some explicitation of norms, conventions, rights of use, authorship, or whatever on annotation, and on the fact that the annotation can also include the text to which it applies in some yet to be explored manner, etc. At the same time, when I listen to you, I have all the alarm bells ringing, because we are in a W3C standardization workshop, and there is one thing that could come that would be that beyond just making visible what is the statute that has been agreed or defined for the annotation, which is an excellent thing, for example, that can help search for things that are freely usable or whatever, there could be the idea of embodying in the standard the enforcement of this statute. And that would be utmost evil. And unfortunately, we already have examples of intention of W3C of doing such things in other domains. So there, I think clearly a technical standard for annotation, if it starts entering in the area of enforcing copyright or even enforcing contracts, then it's a dead standard. I mean, for let's say it's dead for the wide cultural use that I think we all share the vision of when we speak of the value of annotations.
So my response to that would be that a license is not enforcement. A license is just a signal telling what people can do. When you take the person to court for violating a license, that's when enforcement kicks in. But how many people do that, right? In my world, everything would be under public domain. Personally, I don't even use CC licenses. I put everything under CC0. But that's not for everyone, right? When people want different strokes for different folks. And you can't wish copyright away. It's there. Until the time that copyright goes away, we have to live with it. So Creative Commons provides a fix around that.
My point was not about abolishing copyrights. Right. My point was about where a technical standard on annotation must stand in relationship with copyright, which is an entirely different issue. That is, right. Should a standard implement DRM? Should a standard implement or should it simply manifest what are the terms of use?
So if you think of license, as I said, license is nothing but metadata. And think of it as metadata for your annotations. Just telling people what they can do with it, nothing more than that.
Okay, so there's a couple more people, but before we go on, I want to reiterate, I've been in this position before, I'm going to be in this position again, that we are talking about specifically things, and your thing was on topic. The question is, your requirement that you're putting forward is that this should not be an enforcement mechanism, this should be an information mechanism. I want to reinforce that the purpose of this discussion is not to solve the copyright issue, despite right. what I was joking earlier. The purpose of this is to drive requirements for annotations. Yeah. And so let's just make sure to keep it to that point, because I started seeing things drift a little bit. Okay.
One of the things that any copyright or license also leaves, in most cases when people are reading stuff and annotations on even private, published data that other people are doing metadata on, is that fair use and R&D. Now, I think there's value, and I see it in books. I was just looking at Goodreads and some other script today, where you can look at a certain amount that they choose to let you be exposed to. And there's an economic and other incentive even for research and letting other people comment on that and resort back. So I think there's dynamics around just the letter of the law that will drive people who are smart to actually make their data available to others so that they can see those conversations. If we do annotations where we don't enforce it, I'm not a fan of enforcement. I'm a fan of enabling those who say yes. So those who want people to have shared metadata, if you want to see other people's metadata, you probably should make yours available to them. And if we have a standard that enables that type of computer-to-computer data machine-readable format thing happen, that's a better road than actually looking at enforcement, which in some cases the writer may be saying, just like music guys and video guys, I really want to leak that because the more people read it, it actually benefits me in the discussion, the data I get back.
Yep. So, I see no more hands. Oh, rats. Where? I didn't see it. Who?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
No.
See if I can get the right distance here. This is Tom Tech again. On the subject of copyright and annotations and original content, there's actually a couple of examples that I found in my research that people here might find interesting, which is both APA and MLA citation styles for tweets include the entire text of the tweet. So if you are citing a tweet, if you're writing a paper or blog post, whatever, and you're like including a citation of that tweet, their citation style, if you follow it, includes copying the entirety of the tweet, and they say nothing about licensing. So to me, if there's multiple organizations like that that are well understood, well respected for citation standards, saying, essentially encouraging people to copy the entire tweet, that is an assertion about like what de facto rights and expectations there are about copying small pieces of content like that. And so this cultural norms that you speak of, I think these are being formed, and some of them are being formed just by convention. So, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I can point to those references, and you can choose for yourself.
No, I would love to see that. And of course, in the case of tweets, they're also constrained by technology, right? They've taken a decision to have only 140 characters. Well, I mean, that's almost the length of a citation, but an annotation could be very long. Imagine me going to, again, I say National Portrait Gallery, and I make a massive 1,000-word annotation describing the various features of a particular portrait or something like that. That's an annotation. That's very substantive. To reproduce an entire 1,000-word thing that I've written, that would definitely implicate copyright, by most standards.
So, I just like that. I try to move on a little bit because I think, for me at least, the message is very clear, and I personally agree with it, which is that whatever system is developed for annotation at W3C, it should give the necessary hooks to add, if necessary, if somebody is willing or want, add the copyright information to the annotation body, to use this terminology, and that's all there is to it.
That's all.
And as far as I am personally concerned, this is all what W3C should ever do with annotation.
Absolutely.
Full stop. Yeah. So, in a sense, all the other things are, from the working group's point of view, irrelevant.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, when I'm talking about targets for standardization, I'm specifically talking about technical targets, right? We're not standardizing how copyright works. We're standardizing some technical aspects about who. And I think with that,
we've already created the license. All you guys have to do is figure out where to slot it.
Right. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Puneet.
Yep.
Thank you very much.